Oh my God! An unknown waitress in a resort restaurant has done what the world's top doctors could not do. She made two disabled twin boys in wheelchairs smile for the very first time. A powerful millionaire single father then made a decision no one could have ever expected, one that would change her life forever. But he never imagined that behind her gentle smile lay a painful past the world had long forgotten. Who is this mysterious young woman, appearing as if by destiny's design? And why has she become the key to the very survival of this family? Stay with us until the very end. Back to the main story. That evening in Key West, Florida, the sunset burned red like fire, stretching endlessly across the vast ocean and spilling down onto the golden sand. In a scene where every tourist was busy snapping photos, raising cocktails, and laughing along with lively Latin music, one man sat silently in the corner of the resort's most luxurious restaurant, Grant Mitchell. He was once a name on the cover of Forbes, the man the press called the real estate tycoon of the East Coast. On the table before him, wine shimmered in a crystal glass, fine dishes were arranged with precision, yet his gaze lingered on none of them. For a man who could close $100 million deals with nothing more than a handshake, wealth and power were no longer strangers. And yet, beneath that seemingly flawless exterior, a hollow void clung to him like an undertow at sea, silent, persistent, and never willing to fade. As Grant sat there, lost in luxury yet swallowed by loneliness, another sight lit up the room with an unexpected glow. At a table near the window, two twin boys, Noah and Lucas, sat in small wheelchairs. Their faces were pale, their brown hair unkempt, and their eyes had long lost their sparkle. For nearly a year, neither had laughed, neither had spoken a word, existing only as two lost fragments in a noisy world. That day, the waitress on duty was Emily Rhodes, a young woman of only 25, dressed in the resort's simple uniform. She approached with a tray of food in her hands, a soft smile on her lips. No one expected more than professionalism from her. Set the dishes down, take notes, then move on. But instead of merely placing the soup in front of Noah, Emily instinctively knelt down, meeting the boys at eye level. In a gentle voice, her eyes carrying a mischievous glint, she began to tell them a small story, how earlier that afternoon, a playful dolphin had swum into the resort's pool. It tossed a guest float into the air and nearly sent the lifeguard tumbling into the water. The way she told it was clumsy, even silly, but that very silliness carried a strange, undeniable power. Noah, who had stayed silent for so long, suddenly let out a small laugh. It was faint, almost swallowed by the sound of the waves outside, yet loud enough to make everyone nearby freeze in disbelief. Lucas shook his head, lips pressed tight before curving upward into a rare smile, their very first smile in almost a year. From a distance, Grant Mitchell was stunned. He had spent tens of thousands of dollars hiring renowned psychologists from New York to Miami. He had brought the boys to the finest therapy centers. Yet none had pierced through the wall of silence surrounding them. And now, within just a few minutes, an unknown waitress had worked a miracle. In that instant, Grant felt the icy walls within himself crack, if only slightly. He realized that healing does not always come from wealth. It often comes from a heart willing to listen. And dear audience, can you guess what will happen when a powerful millionaire decides to step into the life of a young waitress with a warm heart, yet carrying scars from a painful past? Believe me, if you leave now, you will miss one of the most moving chapters of this story. So, beloved viewers, pause for just a moment, hit subscribe, or drop a comment with the number 1 if you find this story compelling and wish to hear what happens next. Grant Mitchell sat in that restaurant far longer than most guests, even after they had all left one by one. His eyes remained fixed on the small table where the twin boys had just laughed. Just a smile fragile as the last strand of sunlight over the sea, yet enough to leave him frozen in place. The top specialists he once trusted, the state-of-the-art therapy centers he had spared no expense for, all had failed. And yet, a silly story about a dolphin lost in the pool, told by an unknown waitress, had unlocked a door that no one had managed to reach for years. That night, when he left the restaurant and returned to his penthouse on the resort's highest floor, Grant's mind was still in turmoil. Normally, He would spend his evenings with fine wine and a stack of real estate investment reports. But that night, paperwork became meaningless. He sat by the wide glass window, staring out at the rolling ocean, listening to the patter of rain against the balcony, while only one image replayed in his mind: Emily Rhodes. He opened his laptop, activating the network of connections and investigative tools available only to those of his stature. The file appeared quickly, efficiently, and with each line his heart grew heavier. Emily had lost both parents in a car accident at the age of 12. Stripped of her family and her childhood, she was sent to an orphanage in Orlando, then raised herself with scraps of income earned from endless small jobs, washing dishes, waiting tables, working night shifts in convenience stores. Every dollar went to paying for her schooling, determined never to be a burden on anyone. And now, at 25, she was working as a waitress in the most luxurious resort in Key West, a place where one dinner bill could equal her wages for an entire week. Grant leaned back and exhaled a long sigh. In his lifetime, he had met all kinds of people: the ambitious, the razor-sharp business minds, even opportunists who painted themselves in gold to win favor. But Emily was unlike any of them. Her files showed nothing remarkable, except for one detail: he could not shake the eyes. Those eyes were not the practiced gaze of a waitress smiling to please her customers. They were deeper, sadder, as though they carried a story untold. When Emily knelt down to meet Noah and Lucas eye to eye, her gaze reached them not with pity but with understanding. And understanding, Grant knew, could not be rehearsed or faked. He set his wineglass down and gave a dry, ironic laugh to himself. A man who had built an empire of real estate was now losing sleep over trying to understand a girl who waited tables. If the press ever found out, the headlines might scream, "Powerful millionaire, brought down by a waitress's smile." The thought was both absurd and frightening because he knew this was not just a fleeting moment. Outside, the waves pounded steadily against the shore, urging him toward clarity. Grant pressed his fingers against the keyboard, sending off a few calls and emails. He was not seeking information like a man driven by idle curiosity, but like someone desperate to understand why, after so many years of silence, his heart had begun to stir again. That night, he did not sleep. By the time dawn broke and the first light stretched across the ocean, Grant was still there, his eyes ringed with shadows, yet inside him rose a strange and undeniable resolve. He knew then that Emily Rhodes was not just another waitress. She was the key not only to the laughter of the two boys, but to the hollow void within himself. And dear audience, do you believe Grant should take the next step into Emily's life, or step back letting her secret remain buried? Don't turn away just yet, because this story has only begun, and what lies ahead will leave you breathless, unable to look away. The next day, Grant Mitchell walked into the resort's restaurant with the twin boys by his side. He deliberately chose the table by the window, the very spot where Emily had performed her small miracle the night before. Dressed in a simple suit, yet carrying an unmistakable aura, Grant no longer resembled the cold, untouchable millionaire from the magazines. On his face, as he looked at Noah and Lucas, was a mixture of tension and hope. Emily Rhodes faltered when she saw them. She was still in her familiar uniform, her hands trembling slightly as she placed the menus on the table. Grant gently asked if she could spend some time with the boys. Emily shook her head, hesitantly insisting that she was only a waitress, unworthy of such a role. But in that moment, Noah and Lucas turned their eyes toward her, not with words, but with a look of quiet expectation. It was as if an invisible thread pulled directly at Emily's heart. She sighed, forced a small smile, and finally nodded, agreeing to try but only for 3 days. On the first day, Emily sat down on a small chair beside their table. Instead of heavy questions, she began telling stories. Her voice was playful as she spoke about the crabs on the beach and their secret profession, stealing tourists' flip-flops. The idea was absurd, imagining a crab dragging sandals 3 times its size, so much so that a few guests at nearby tables burst into laughter. But Noah and Lucas remained silent. Their wide eyes gave nothing back, as still as the sea on a windless day. Emily was unsettled, but she did not give up. On the second day, she arrived with a surprise. An old ukulele, its wooden body scratched, its strings unevenly taut. "It's been with me since high school," she half-joked, "and somehow, it still hasn't abandoned me." A few nearby diners smiled, while Grant, standing at a distance, watched quietly. Emily began to strum simple chords, singing a familiar Hawaiian tune that anyone who had ever listened to the ocean's waves might recognize. Her voice was not perfect, sometimes off-key, but it was gentle, warm, and comforting. And then, suddenly, Noah's small finger tapped a rhythm against the side of his wheelchair. Once, then twice shaky but deliberate. Emily's heart skipped a beat. From afar, Grant's hand clenched tight as he realized a miracle had just taken place. On the third day, the Key West sky was clear, and the sea breeze carried the fresh scent of salt. Emily brought no instrument this time, only an old picture book. She opened it and read aloud in a steady rhythm, telling of white sails leaving the harbor, of docks alive with the cries of seagulls. The story was simple, but the light in her eyes made it vivid. And then, Lucas, the quieter of the two, lifted his head. In his dull brown eyes flickered a strange new light. Slowly, he reached out his small hand and clasped Emily's roll. Noah followed, his weak fingers curling around her other hand. Emily froze. She felt the warmth of their trembling hands flow straight into her heart. A fleeting moment, yet so profound that the entire room seemed to fall silent. From afar, Grant's throat tightened, his chest constricting as if bound by unseen hands. This was no coincidence. It was an invisible bond weaving the three of them together, breaking through walls that months of effort had failed to touch. Those faint smiles, those shaky taps of rhythm, those fragile hand clasps, perhaps they meant little to the outside world, but to Grant, they were the unmistakable signs of a miracle. And dear audience, do you believe these 3 days are only the beginning of a journey far greater? Take a moment to relax. Comment below and let me know what time it is where you're watching from. It brings me joy to know you're sharing this story with us from every corner of the world. Grant Mitchell could not sit still after those 3 days. He had witnessed hundreds of business deals that shifted entire markets, yet never once had he felt both powerless and deeply curious at the same time as he did now. The smiles of Noah and Lucas were no longer fleeting miracles. They hinted at a greater secret, one tied to the young waitress. Grant knew well that to truly understand Emily Rhodes, he had to look beyond what any administrative file could reveal. The connections and sources Grant had cultivated over years in the world of tycoons were quietly set in motion. A few phone calls, a handful of discreet emails, and even a short trip to Orlando. The deeper he searched, the more strange gaps appeared in Emily's history. The records claimed that her parents had both died in a car accident when she was 12, but hospital reports told a different story. The mother had indeed not survived, but the father, George Rhodes, was alive, though badly injured and suffering from temporary memory loss. In the chaos of that night, Emily, lightly injured, was taken to a different hospital. That was where the confusion began. Her records were filed incorrectly, and she was swiftly placed in the orphan system. No one noticed. No one corrected it. Her father, after months of treatment, could only recall scattered fragments. He searched for his daughter, but with a frail body, no money and no support, the effort was like swimming against a relentless tide. Meanwhile, Emily grew up believing she had been abandoned. Grant sat for hours before the tangled documents, his eyes pausing on one shaky line in an old social report. George Rhodes continues to insist that his daughter is alive. His heart sank. Suddenly, the entire picture became clear. The reason Emily always bowed her head, always held back, was not shyness. It was because deep inside, she carried a distorted belief that if even her own father hadn't kept her, perhaps she was never worthy of love. He closed his eyes, remembering the moment Emily held the hands of Noah and Lucas. In her gaze was not only patience but a reflection of her own painful memory. She understood the children's loneliness because she too had once been left alone in an empty room. Compassion like that is not learned from books. It is forged through countless nights without the embrace of a parent. Grant let out a bitter laugh. All his life he had believed that money could fix anything. A failed project, a broken contract, even a child's pain. But Emily was living proof that there are wounds no amount of money could mend, wounds that can only be healed with love and truth. A thought struck him, and he chuckled, tinged with irony. If the press ever found out that a Forbes millionaire was spending hours combing through social service files to uncover the past of a waitress, they would surely craft a headline loud enough to shake the city. But Grant did not care. This was no longer about curiosity. This was the key, the answer for Emily, and for the two boys he now saw as his own flesh and blood. As night fell, Grant rose and stepped onto the balcony of his penthouse. The waves of Key West crashed hard against the shore, urging him to act. He knew that if Emily continued to believe she had been abandoned, she would forever live within her shell of fear. But if he could show her the truth that her father had never stopped searching, then perhaps not only Emily would be saved, but Noah and Lucas too would find the faith to step out of the shadows. And dear audience, do you think Grant should reveal this truth to Emily right away, or wait until the right moment when she has the strength to face her past? Don't leave yet, for what lies ahead may just shatter your heart wide open. Ever since discovering the truth about Emily, Grant looked at her differently. He no longer saw just a simple waitress before him, but a human being carrying both resilience and hidden wounds. And the strangest part was that he began to notice every small detail in how she lived, how she was present. During the days Emily spent with Noah and Lucas, Grant watched closely. When the boys spilled a glass of water, instead of sighing or quickly wiping it up as anyone else might, she laughed, cleaning as she teased. Maybe one day you two will become abstract painters with water as your art. That light humor lifted the heavy air and made it easier to breathe. When Lucas stubbornly refused to have his hair brushed, Emily never scolded. She simply sat down patiently, brushing each tangled strand as if she were handling a precious treasure. Even those seemingly ordinary moments filled Grant's heart with a strange warmth. He began to realize that he was waiting for those moments. Sometimes, instead of burying himself in an office piled high with reports, he found excuses to step into the children's room, just to see Emily. A tilted smile, a casual song, even the sound of her flustered laughter when Noah teased her back, all became fragments that slowly mended the emptiness in his chest. Then one evening, as the crimson sunset stretched across the sea, the four of them sat together around a wooden table. Emily patiently guided Noah's hand as he wrote his very first letters. The boy's trembling fingers moved slowly across the page, leaving shaky but priceless strokes. Sitting opposite, Grant held the paper steady. In one unexpected instant, his hand brushed lightly against Emily's. That brief touch was enough to quiet every sound around them. Grant felt his chest pounding with a rhythm he hadn't known in years. A heart once sealed shut by misfortune now stirred awake, revived by the touch of her slender yet warm hand. Emily felt it too. Her eyes flickered with unease before she quickly pulled her hand back, standing abruptly as if the ground beneath her feet had turned to fire. A familiar sorrow crossed her face. I'm not worthy, she whispered, her voice breaking like sea wind against the cliffs. Without another second's pause, Emily turned and ran out. Grant froze. In that instant, he longed to call after her, to run and explain that he saw no flaw in her, only the very thing he had been searching for. But his throat was tight, leaving only the steady sound of waves breaking outside. As night fell, the seaside villa grew silent. Noah and Lucas were asleep, but Grant remained alone in the living room, turning an unfinished glass of wine between his fingers. The image of Emily walking away, her words not worthy still echoing, gnawed at his mind. Beneath the patience and love she had shown the boys was a woman carrying such a heavy burden of guilt that she denied herself the right to happiness. Grant knew that if he stopped here, everything they had just built would dissolve like sea foam. But did he have the strength to tear down the wall of her past, or would it all end here and now? After the night Emily ran away, Grant barely slept. He sat by the window staring out at the restless ocean, haunted by the words, "I'm not worthy." A part of him wanted to let go, to allow everything to drift away like the failed deals he had once witnessed. But then, the image of Noah and Lucas's small hands clutching Emily's The light in their eyes, shining for the first time in months, came back to him. If Emily walked away, it would not only mean he lost a ray of light, but the two boys would also sink back into their old darkness. Grant chose to act. He hired people to dig through old records, long-forgotten medical reports buried beneath layers of dust. The search took him back to Orlando, the place that had witnessed the accident that tore Emily from her family. After days of persistence, he found a lead, a small nursing home, where an old, frail man with silver hair still, from time to time, spoke of a missing daughter named Emily. Grant arrived one drizzling afternoon. Inside a modest room, the pale glow of a desk lamp fell across the deeply wrinkled face of George Rhodes. The man trembled, but his eyes lit with startling clarity when he heard his daughter's name. She's still alive, isn't she? His voice was weak, yet the hope was unmistakable. Grant needed no further proof. He knew then this was Emily's father, a man who through all these years had clung to the unshaken belief that his daughter had never truly been lost. On his way out of the nursing home, Grant felt his heartbeat pounding. He had closed hundreds of contracts, watched skyscrapers rise from nothing but sketches, yet never had a decision left him trembling like this one. He understood that bringing Emily back to her father was not just about the truth. It was the only chance for her to believe that the past was not a curse. Still, he also knew that revealing everything at once could overwhelm her. A woman who had lived her whole life believing she was abandoned would not easily accept that she had only been misplaced. Grant realized he needed time and the right approach. First, he had to make her believe that happiness was something she deserved. In the days that followed, Grant appeared more often by Emily's side. He never pushed, simply created moments where she could feel her importance. Once, when Lucas spilled a box of crayons, Emily knelt to pick them up one by one. Grant crouched down too, but clumsy as he was, he accidentally grabbed a straw. Emily laughed aloud, a clear, ringing sound so rare it startled him. If the real estate tycoon can mistake a straw for a crayon, that's definitely a Guinness World Record, she teased. Grant laughed too, but silently thought to himself, if it meant hearing her laugh again, he would gladly break every record in the world. Little by little, Emily grew less guarded. Yet in her eyes, Grant could still glimpse a shadow of fear that never truly left. He knew that only when Emily faced her father could the truth strike hard enough to shatter the wall inside her heart. One night, Grant sat in his penthouse, the file on George Rhodes laid neatly across the table. He gazed at the photograph of the frail old man, then thought of Emily's eyes, always searching the horizon as if longing for something far away. Within him, a fierce resolve ignited. It was time to reunite father and daughter. But the greatest question remained: how would Emily respond? Would she find the courage to face the truth, or would she run away once more? That afternoon, the sunlight poured over Key West golden as honey, so radiant that the entire resort was bathed in a gentle glow. In the garden shaded by palm trees, the soft strumming of a ukulele drifted through the air. Emily sat on a wooden chair, her blonde hair shimmering in the light, her fingers plucking simple notes. Across from her, Noah and Lucas sat in their wheelchairs, their small hands tapping along to the rhythm, their eyes shining as if they had captured the entire sky. To the children, it was more than a song, it was a lullaby of comfort, a fragile thread that tied them to the outside world. Grant Mitchell approached, his shadow stretching long across the grass. He did not speak right away, only stood silently for a moment, taking in the scene so ordinary on the surface, yet filled with more miracles than any $1,000,000 deal he had ever known. Then he smiled, gently resting his hand on Emily's shoulder. His gaze was steady yet tender. "Come with me. Someone is waiting for you," he said softly. Emily hesitated. She set the ukulele down and followed Grant. The boys cheered as though they already knew a miracle was about to unfold. The hallway of the nursing home was quiet, broken only by the faint sound of wheelchair wheels rolling across the tiles. They stopped before a small wooden door. Grant pushed it open. Inside the simple room sat an elderly man with silver hair, perched on the edge of the bed. His face was gaunt, his eyes trembling, but his smile lit up the moment he saw her. "Emily?" His voice was frail, yet every syllable struck her heart. The whole world seemed to shatter. Emily froze, her legs trembling. For years she had believed she had been abandoned, that no one had ever wanted to remember her. But with just a single word, a trembling voice, all of that collapsed. Tears streamed down her face. She rushed forward, throwing herself into the arms of the frail old man. "Father!" she cried, her voice breaking. George Rhodes wrapped his shaking arms around his daughter, whispering hoarsely, "I never stopped searching for you, Emily. Never." A simple sentence, yet strong enough to wash away years of pain. Noah and Lucas clapped excitedly beside them, as though celebrating the arrival of a miracle. In that small room, laughter and tears blended together into the most moving melody Grant had ever heard. He stood there, his throat tight, but within his heart, for the first time in years, light spread, light of faith, of reunion, of family. Months later, as summer gilded the beaches of Key West, another scene unfolded. On the soft white sand, the crimson sunset painted the ocean gold. The sea breeze blew gently, carrying the scent of salt and the sound of waves like drums beating for a sacred moment. Grant knelt before Emily, his hand trembling as he held out a simple silver ring. Looking up, his eyes were steady but brimming with love. "Not only because of Noah and Lucas," his deep voice quivered, "but because I love you. Be my wife." Emily stood still, tears rolling down her cheeks. She looked at Grant, then at Noah and Lucas, two boys giggling behind him, their eyes sparkling, and she nodded through her tears. In that moment, every scar of the past dissolved like foam on the waves. Noah and Lucas clapped and laughed, their pure laughter spilling into the air like wind chimes, carried away by the ocean breeze. It was not just the laughter of two children, but of a family pieced together by love, by patience, and by courage. The story of Grant, Emily, Noah, and Lucas reminds us that the most precious things in life are not found in money or status, but in the patience to recognize the value in a heart that once seemed broken. True miracles do not come from laboratories or million-dollar contracts, but from the courage to mend and the strength of love that chooses to stay. And you, dear listener, after hearing this story, what do you believe? Do you think that sometimes a miracle is as simple as holding on tightly to a hand and never letting go? Share your thoughts in the comments, leave a like, and pass this story along to your friends and loved ones in the United States so that others too may feel the healing power of love.